Now, the vision and action for the wool sector put together by the government-appointed Wool Industry Project Action Group suggests New Zealand is on the cusp of a natural fibre renaissance, being led by more environmentally and socially conscious consumers. That's all in the article Farmers Weekly reporter Annette Scott on the front page of this week's newspaper. Now, Mount Summer Station farmer and Project Action Group member Kate Acland said bringing the report together was always going to be fraught with issues, yet it was a chance for the sector to finally come together and realise its potential. And she joins us now with husband David Acland. Good evening and thanks for joining us, team.
Hi, thanks for having us.
That's right.
Kate, how was the process being involved in this action group? You know, a long drawn-out process with several years and several chairs.
Well, it certainly had its ups and downs at moments. I mean, it was hugely challenging, but it was actually hugely rewarding because everyone who was in the room, they were all there for the same reason, and that was just to make things better in the strong wool industry. It wasn't several years. Initially, the group was just a series of workshops, and there was about 40 or 50 of us involved. And after about 6 months of that, they were all independently chaired. But after 6 months, we sort of came to the conclusion that we needed a more focused group. And then that's when the Project Action Group was formed, and that was about 12 months ago, and that had John Rodwell as its chair. So we had the single chair the whole way through. But it did take us about 12 months to get the report out, and COVID didn't really help that. But we got there in the end. And I guess, initially the Project Action Group, a huge amount of work was actually just involved in gaining trust. Because what I hadn't appreciated, I've only been farming for 10 years, was all the history that goes behind and sort of how much baggage there was in the industry. So just to get a group of people sitting around the table and all agreeing on some of those steps that could move us forward was actually quite a big thing.
Yeah, now, David, and you'll know a lot about this baggage, being from a farming family in Mid-Canterbury for many generations. But your role with Federated Farmers and chair of the Meat and Wool group for Mid-Canterbury. Has the government fully understood farmers' woolly woes? And what is the responsibility in your mind, from everything that you've seen from your family history and your role in governance, about what is the responsibility of industry versus government to step in?
Well, I think the government has understood there's an issue within the wool industry. I think with the report and the way the report's played out, it's showed, one, to the government that it's not a simple fix, there's no silver bullet. And I think that's important to understand, and that there's many facets to it. And I think looking forward now with the government's push on Taio, with the whole, the natural and, renewable resources and that sort of thing, there's a government responsibility to assist industry in that, but there's also a responsibility for industry, as in the manufacturer and the traders, to come in from the other side and take advantage of what the government is putting out there, and for farmers to really grasp it and understand too. And farmers have a responsibility to make sure that they are producing a good product, that they are doing the proper shed preparation, because there will be differences in price on shed preparation, and there is a cost to it. At the moment, there's a cost to wool, but we can minimise that cost by doing a good job of it. For the ones that aren't necessarily doing a great job of it, it's going to cost them more. I think there's no easy sort of boundary between industry and government. Government's willing to help, but industry have to take advantage of that and really grab it and work together and push forward for the vision of where New Zealand wants to go.
Kate, there was great expectation, as there is with all of these visions, that it will be the silver bullet. Of course, you can't be that, but of course, from any action group and, of course, recommendations, there needs to be some form of structure come out of it. What were those main recommendations for those who haven't read the report? And talk to us about this proposed governance structure as well.
Well, I think you nailed it with the great expectations, because that was probably what made the whole process so difficult, because all of us were just aware that everyone was waiting for this magic answer, which of course, I mean, if it was easier, we would have done it. But there was a few key recommendations. The main one was around engaging a group of global experts who specialise in consumer-focused strategy to actually map out a strategic roadmap for the wool industry. There's a pretty widespread feeling out there from a lot of angles that structural change is what's needed, and we spent a lot of time talking through structural change. But we came to the conclusion actually that structure without a strategy behind it is not going to affect the change that we need. And we sort of thought that the consumer focus is more and more important, and we need something different to what we've done before. So that was the strategic roadmap, and also mapping out some strategic investment cases for the strong wool industry. And alongside that, there was a recommendation for an executive function to just take care of some of that sort of BAU stuff, the training and capability, the on-farm assurance plans, on-farm research. And that was more, it was a recommendation that we needed the sector match fit and ready to take advantage of any of these opportunities that might come along. And I mean, as farmers, we effectively chose not to invest in any of this stuff when we voted the levy out 10 years ago, and very little of that is happening. And the industry, I mean, we all know it's an industry in decline. So it was more just a recommendation that we needed to start investing in some of that stuff, and so that we had motivated farmers and we produced quality wool and we produced ethically. We had enough shearers, we had shearers that were skilled, and there were no animal welfare issues. So all of that stuff, that the foundations were right, so that we can then grasp the opportunities. And then lastly was the governance. Contrary to what some people in the industry have sort of criticised, it's not the recommendation of a wool board. All it is just a recognition that to affect any of the changes in the report, it's going to need some sort of governance structure. And as the project action group, we realised that we don't necessarily have those skills within us, and that we probably need to get some professional skills from outside the industry to actually really affect some of that change.
It's interesting because there is no one thing first and a domino effect. It's really a lot of things happening all in a line, isn't it? Demand and, of course, getting that supply right. David, how do you believe that we can achieve this with such a fragmented commercial supply chain in the wool industry, from farmer to consumer, to ensure that that farm gate price actually does lift, as opposed to just adding up huge brand margin towards the consumer end?
Well, I think farmers have got to look outside the farm gate and look to who they are working with, and try and get an understanding of who they are working with, where they're selling their wool, instead of just putting it into the auction, making sure they're having, if they are just working with a broker, making sure they're having the conversations with the broker about trying to dig a bit deeper about where it's going. And that's the small steps to making sure that I was surprised that not everyone has the broker or the wool buyer coming into the shed at least once a year to work with their shearing contractor to make sure that their shed preparation is up to scratch, or what they believe the market is wanting at that point in time. So it's that small step, and with aligning the industry, if farmers are starting to focus on the people that they are willing to deal with further down the track, then that'll reduce the fragmentation of the industry. And then with the farm assurance programs and that side of things, there's a multitude of them out there at the moment. But if there's one industry baseline one, then everyone's going to be able to work off that, and it'll all slowly just narrow down. But if the farmer's just saying, "Oh, I'm just going to throw it out the gate to whoever's going to come past and pick it up," it's still going to remain a fragmented industry. As we've seen with the meat industry now, there's probably a whole lot more discipline within the meat industry of how and who you sell sheep through or lamb through, because of the different contracts that are out there and the scale of it. There's only a few really big players in the meat industry left, and most people now who are finishing lambs are having a very close relationship with a buyer from one of those processors rather than an intermediary. And I think that's where the wool industry has to get to. for the farmers relationship has to get to.
And also, too, for that surety of risk management, supply contracts becoming of more value to the farmer to be able to invest in things like shed preparation.
Well, yeah, and having an understanding of what they're going to be making. I think shed preparation, they don't necessarily have supply contracts for lamb, and they're still doing a good job on that. So you've got to be proud of the product you're putting out the gate. And I think that comes back to being proud of the industry, and it comes back to that strategy and having a strategic vision of where the industry's going and having a real understanding of that. So actually buying into Teo and further down the track of what we're producing, farmers have to get that pride back into wool, and actually learning and having a good understanding of the product themselves, and also buying the product themselves, whether it be woolen, the old swan dry, or demanding the products that they are given, whether it's a beanie from a supply shop that if it's polyester, just handing it back to them and saying, hang on, mate, we're in the wool industry here. And it's all about the small steps, isn't it? But with farmers are doing that, because we can't demand a consumer to want to buy wool if we're not in that same space as well.
Kate, what has been your biggest learnings and value add beyond the Mount Somers gate? And do you believe that there is a renaissance towards natural fibre that's just around the corner?
So I firmly believe that the way the world's moving towards a more natural and sustainable and healthy lifestyle, that we are on the renaissance of a natural fibre renaissance. But the challenge for us is to make sure that it's a woolen natural fibre renaissance. So we need to get ourselves organised as an industry. We also need to think outside the square a bit as farmers, because there's no, we need to think of wool as more than just carpet and furnishings. I sit on the board of RONS, which is the Wool Research Organisation, and there's some really exciting stuff coming out of RONS with new uses for wool. But again, it needs a strong industry and a strong foundation and ethically produced wool and all of these great things. So we need to get ourselves organised to take up that opportunity. And I think as farmers too, it's been really interesting post the release of the report to see the reactions from some of the industry. Like, we need to be cognizant as farmers of who we're dealing with, and be aware of what people we think are actually going to be willing to affect the change, and which ones are happy with the status quo.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Kate and David Acland from Mount Somers Station. Of course, Kate was heavily involved in the Project Action Group for the Wool Working Group that Damien O'Connor put together. And that's just been released, as well as, of course, David Acland's a huge involvement in the industry as a farmer, but also with Federated Farmers as a meat and wool chair in Mid-Canterbury.
This is Sarah's Country.